All right, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'll get started where everyone else does. As far as earliest childhood memory, what are we getting into?
My earliest childhood memory. Oh my gosh. That's crazy. I was not expecting this.
We're going way back.
Um, Probably at Disney World as like a very, very little kid
Okay,
on one of
okay.
those Disney World rides, just crying because I was terrified.
Well, I was gonna ask, was it a good was
It
it a good
was
memory?
it was the one where you're like going down the river and everyone is getting splashed with water. And
Okay.
I don't think I wanted to get wet. So I was crying.
Was your family a Disney one and done? Did you guys go back a lot?
It was like I think we went twice or something,
Okay.
but it was more for my sister, I think.
It's like you're coming with.
Yeah, we did the whole like princess breakfast thing and
Okay.
I was just there. I was just hanging.
Part of the family, part of the family.
Yeah. A really interesting side note though is our first time we went to Disney World, I was like super young, like still riding in the backpack.
Yeah.
But that was in 2001, right after 9/11.
Okay.
And we were gonna fly there in the airplane, but then like literally while we were in the airport, they shut everything down.
Oh, you were
So
real
then
close.
my parents like packed us all up in the car and drove from Michigan down to Florida.
Wow.
And then we like got there and the next day I think there was like a hurricane in
Oh no.
Disney World.
Yeah.
And so like they closed the park down to like anybody coming in, but we were already in the park because we were staying there.
Oh, let's
And
go.
so it was like empty. The whole place was empty. Of course, I don't remember any of it because
Yeah.
I was about like one and a half, but it was just like the whole place was empty.
That I mean, your parents must have been like, "Hey, we made the right decision. We're good to go."
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a once in a lifetime experience for everybody, but I was just
Yeah,
half
you were
asleep
you were
most of the
there.
time. I was a baby at that point.
So growing up in Michigan, what was the I'm trying to figure out the best way to ask the question. So me growing up as a kid, I was told to go outside, come back when it's dinner time. What was it like for you at a young age?
I mean, a little bit of the same. I grew up in a rural part of Michigan, so I have a lot of woods to explore as a kid in my backyard, and also
Yeah,
my grandparents live just 2 minutes down the road from my house.
that's
And
great.
so, yeah, and they own like 40 acres of
Woo.
land, and it's a great place to grow up as a kid and just be running around out there in the woods with my grandpa, and
Yeah.
he's teaching me how to fish and all that stuff. So definitely a little bit of a wild child growing up
Mm.
and spent a lot of time just being active, being outside, playing, running around, having a good time.
Yeah, when I first asked the question, it was I was interested to see how people were growing up and at what point does that out time stop? Because I know at some point in the generations it stops, but I have a 3-year old and a 9 month old. I'm like, I need to get these kids outside. Everyone I have on is doing okay.
Yeah, yeah. It's the thing I realize is like when I have kids, I really want to let them spend
Yeah,
as much time as they can outside. Like gonna try to avoid a lot of the technology and
yeah.
hopefully get them creating and being more extroverted by just playing outside.
For sure. There's called like adventure classes, and it's literally just like being outside. It's
Oh, that's awesome.
it's like this is now a specialty, just not
Yeah.
not being in the home. It's
That's
like, all right,
crazy.
we'll go do that. Uh,
Uh-huh.
so did you have many siblings growing up? What was the scenario there?
It was just me and my older sister. She's
Okay.
about 3.5 years older than me.
Hmm.
So like close enough in age, but also like to the point where like every time I moved up to elementary school, she was like getting out of it. And then when I moved up to high school, she just got out of it. And then when I got
Yeah.
to college, she just got out of it, you know? So it was like we were kind of chasing, I was chasing her throughout education, you know,
Yeah.
but um it was cool. We ended up going to the same college as well.
Nice.
Same as my parents. Everyone in my family pretty much went to Michigan State, so
Yeah.
a big lineage there, which is cool. And but it was just cool. And her boyfriend, who's now her husband, was still at Michigan State for I think 2 of the years that I was there. So that was it was cool.
That's awesome. So, what was it mostly your grandpa that you were hanging out with then outside, or did you have a group of friends there as well?
As a young kid, I I definitely like when I was really, really young, it would definitely be spending time with my grandpa. And when mom and dad got home, messing around with them a little bit.
Yeah.
If both my parents were working, I would kind of be getting babysat at my grandparents or be going to school. And then if I wasn't going to school, I would like if I was sick or something, then they would take me to grandma's house,
Yeah.
and I would just hang out there for the whole day. Um,
I'm gonna have to
but
get grandpa's fitness routine. He seems like he was on it.
oh, I mean, my grandpa, he's amazing. He was a gym teacher
Okay.
when he was working, and then into like retirement, he still was super active and always moving around. And I mean, he has 40 acres, so he'd be
Right.
always doing something there. And it's a big thing that he would always do a headstand. Like every day, he would always do headstands.
That's fantastic.
And I like have video of him doing a headstand when he was like 80 years old.
No way.
Yeah, so like it's really cool to see him being able to do all that.
Yeah.
And he's still alive, but he's starting to struggle with some issues of Alzheimer's disease
Yeah.
and stuff. It's really interesting to see how his body was able to hold up longer than his mind was, but
Yeah.
it's a little sad, but he's still happy and he's still moving around, so
That's
it's
nice.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my grandpa, he was very well known for just loving to work, and he worked until the day he died. Well, pretty much. Uh,
Hmm.
and he would play cribbage. But yeah, he's like, no, I gotta keep my mind fresh, and like he would go ride on his bike or he'd get in the water. He's like, I know, I gotta move. Like it's
Yeah.
just it's important.
Yeah.
So what do you think stemmed either like fitness or sports for you at a young age? Were you playing stuff in middle school, high school? What were you getting into?
I think a little bit of it was just like the love of movement and the love of being active. And I was very much the kid in school who, like, I can't sit still. The
Yeah,
teacher's not gonna be happy with me because I'm gonna be fidgety and I don't want to sit in class all day. And like recess was my favorite subject growing up,
yeah,
So very much like the movement. I come from an active family. Like my parents were both collegiate athletes. They were only for a short time, both of them, but my dad was a swimmer all throughout high school. He held a lot of state records in Illinois, I think.
yeah,
Um, they're probably broken now, but I know at least at a few pools he still has a time up there. But he went to Michigan State, had a shoulder injury that inevitably ended his swimming career. Then he got into the martial arts. He did karate and then got into cycling. And so, like, I grew up seeing him doing these athletic things as well. And then my mom was on the track team at Michigan State.
Oh, cool.
And I think she did that for 2 or 3 years.
Mhm.
And then she became a physical therapist. So there's
Okay.
a lot of knowledge about the human body and health and
Oh, that's
movement.
super helpful.
And yeah, exactly. And so anytime I'd have a bump or a bruise or a scrape
Yeah,
or anything, she'd be able to fix it usually. And that was very helpful in my career. Still
yeah,
is.
for sure. What did
Um,
you see through your dad's? I would say swimming and biking just seem so mental. How did you perceive that as a young kid or just as a kid in general?
I think for me, I only really got to see him training hard in the cycling because
Okay.
by then, like he was done with swimming. I would see him swim every once in a while, and it was very like eye-opening to see him move that way,
Yeah,
where it's just like all of a sudden this guy's like doing a butterfly, and it's like, oh my gosh, like you can tell that's years of experience right
yeah,
there, and I like never knew he could do that. Um, but for the cycling, like I definitely remember there would be times where he would be in the basement just cycling, and like we have this kind of like cement room in our basement,
yeah,
just felt like a dungeon, and he would just be down there cycling, just sweating, and just
yeah,
he's working so hard, and he's usually watching some like movie or something,
yeah,
and I go down there and see him, and it was definitely an interesting thing to see. It was interesting to watch, and I remember going to a few of his bike races as well. It was very cool to see him competing still. And yeah, I never really wanted to get into cycling. Um, but it was cool to see him being
yeah.
active and physical.
It you,
Eh,
you you don't see a lot of I would say young cyclists. Like usually it's older
yeah.
in life than you get into those. I mean, of course, like if you grow up in a biking family and stuff like that, you get into it. But
Mhm.
I
It's
my mom,
only the Europeans
yeah.
usually.
I was gifted a biking thing during the winter where you would go to like a bike shop and train with a bunch of people. And I was like, oh, okay, like I'm kind of fit. I work out a lot. And we get on right away. Not a lot of talking. Like I'm still figuring out how to use a trainer. And like I win whatever like segment we were doing, and they're like, "All right, we're done with the warm up." I'm like, "Oh my God!" And
Yeah.
like, and these guys were just animals. They're going 30,
Yeah.
35 indoor. I'm like, it's got to be downhill, like right, like something, something's going on with this, but just absolute animals.
Yeah,
Uh,
those bikers are nuts.
yeah. What sports did you start playing when you were growing up, either in middle school or high school?
I really played everything growing up.
Yeah.
At least I wanted to try and play everything, you know. There was a point where I was trying to go around and collect a medal from every sport.
Nice.
Just as a little kid. So I did the soccer, baseball, but those were like the only two sports where I did it once and I was like, okay, I'm done. Not doing it again.
I'm out. I'm out.
Yeah. Then I played football, played basketball, ran track a decent amount throughout like elementary school. Continued with football, stopped doing track actually after fourth grade because I was like faster than everyone. I was beating a lot of people, and I was I think some of the middle school kids were like coming down to like help with practice, and I was like beating them, and I was
Yeah.
like, okay, like this is fun, but like I knew a lot of athletic guys were not doing track at that time
Yeah.
because they were doing other sports. And so I was like, well, I'm interested in playing lacrosse. So I did that for I think 2 to 3 years.
Mhm.
And that was a great sport, very interesting, very fun. So that took my spring schedule. And then so now it was football, basketball, lacrosse for a few years, and then stopped playing basketball for middle school because I think it was like tryout for the team kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I um I got into parkour,
Let's
and
go.
yeah. So I started doing a lot of flips and tricks and running and jumping off of things and climbing up things, and it
What
was
uh what got you into parkour? Was it a Red Bull video? Was it like the first like because I
it
remember
was
well I forget the guy's last name, but it was like perfect with parkour. He won like the first competition or whatever it was. And I was
was it
like,
Ryan Doyle,
I have no idea.
maybe?
I'm I think almost 34 now, so it might have been a
Yeah,
year before when when you started, but I did it with my buddies for maybe like 6 months. I was like, oh, like I don't know how to flip. No one's spotting.
yeah.
Like I'm not gonna like I'm good. I'm just gonna jump from this and climb that thing.
Mm. Yeah, no, I watched a video online, and I mean you see it already, and like you saw it in movies and
Yeah.
TV shows and even like video games, Assassin's Creed,
Yep.
stuff like that. And you would see it and you would be like, "Oh yeah, like this is just like being like a ninja, or this is how they move and stuff. And then like I saw a video of like people practicing it on the streets
Yeah.
and like actual guys jumping from building to building, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like this is cool." And like as a younger kid who already enjoyed to run around, and like it was just something was so attractive to me,
Yeah.
to that idea of like running and jumping off of things and doing flips. And it's so good for your body to learn that like
Yeah.
coordination and control, and have that aerial awareness where you know where you are when you're
Mhm.
doing a flip. You know where your foot's landing when you're trying to jump between like a balance beam and a pad and all these different things. And
Yeah.
so that became like my sport for a while,
Awesome.
all
Did
throughout.
did you do gymnastics or you just picked up?
Yeah, as a
Okay.
as a very little kid, I did gymnastics for a few years because my mom, very smart with like the human body stuff. She knew that like doing gymnastics is very, very beneficial for developing kids as athletes.
Yeah.
So and I enjoyed it already. Like as a kid, it was just fun to mess around with that. And also like growing up, I had a trampoline, so
There we go.
always playing on it. But then kind of discovered parkour, really got invested in that, and that kind of ended up taking over for football and basketball. And then it was just at that point I was doing parkour, and I got interested in pole vaulting.
Okay.
And so they kind of are in the same group of like just wild sports, you
Yeah.
know?
How'd you
Um,
get into pole vaulting? I had a woman on and she did gymnastics, and I think the middle school or high school coach was really into development, and like she came over to all these gymnastics girls. She's like, "Hey, you got good upper body strength. You should give this a shot. You're gonna do really well, and you don't have to work out as much." And this girl's like, "Absolutely. This sounds like more fun."
yeah, no, pole vault is one of those sports that's just kind of like wild X Games kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think it was like watching it in the Olympics or watching it somewhere, I don't know where, but I just remember like seeing it and going like, okay, that looks like a cool track event. Like I want to try that. That looks awesome. And then also my idea in my head at that point was like I was like, well, I could probably get pretty good at this, and then I could get a scholarship to go to college.
Okay.
Which is a weird way to look at it as a little kid, going
Yeah.
like, I think there was some fear and some nerves in me of like, oh, like I need to make it into college, whatever. And so I was like, well, I'll be really good at pole vault and I'll make it into college from pole vault.
Yeah.
Um, but so I started pole vault in seventh grade, and then I was doing parkour, doing pole vault, and then around my sophomore year of high school,
Mhm.
I had some buddies on the swim team who had like obviously seen me doing flips and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, you would be so good at diving. Like you should try being a diver." And I was like, I mean, I guess, okay, I'll try it.
Yeah.
And I had a really good time because it's just doing flips with the safety of landing in the water. I mean,
Right.
you could definitely smack and belly flop, and that's not fun, but other than that, it was just a great time just doing a lot of flips every single day. And so
Would you say this was an affluent area in Michigan that you went to school? Because I'm trying to, I we didn't have a pool at our school, and I think we didn't have like a real track program until like a little bit before high school.
yeah, no, definitely. It's a suburb of Grand Rapids
Okay.
called Forest Hills.
Okay.
And the swim team was made up of three different schools. So it
Nice.
was like Forest Hills Central, Forest Hills Eastern, and Forest Hills Northern, all made up the swim team, which was just the Forest Hills swim team.
Hmm.
The track team was through the high school,
Yeah.
and it wasn't the best track team because it was just like teachers teaching the kids in high
Okay.
school. Like they might have ran track when they were in high school, and so now they're teaching high schoolers how to run track.
Yeah.
It's not like the best coaching you're ever going to get. But my pole vault coach was great because he was a vaulter way back when they were jumping into like sawdust. But then he coached his son to jump pretty high, and so then he was continuing to coach, and he coached me.
Yeah.
helped me out a lot. But then he also was really good at outsourcing me to different groups in Michigan where he's like, okay, I know a lot about pole vault, but
Yeah.
this guy knows more than me, so you should go learn from him.
That's awesome.
And so yeah, that was great. And so that kind of became my high school was doing diving in the winter, pole vault a little bit in the winter,
Yeah.
mostly pole vaulting in the spring, a little bit of pole vaulting in the summer, and then trying to go do parkour as much as I could throughout the year.
What did eating look like to try to sustain this amount of volume?
It's interesting because I never thought about nutritional stuff for performance.
Yeah.
It was always based off of like food allergies because when I grew up, I was allergic to a few things. And
What
again,
what
my
were you
mom,
what were you allergic to? I was wheat, soy, and corn, and pretty much any outdoor, indoor animal, cats, and dust.
yeah, yeah. My mom was really smart about all that stuff, and like I was having some issues as a little kid, just being like maybe a little extra moody here and there, or
Yeah.
like I would get sick more often, and she got my allergies tested and found out I was allergic to wheat, gluten, dairy, and then those were like the main ones.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, some more showed up that was like food sensitivities. I
Okay.
was like sensitive to peanut butter, eggs. There was like there's a few more extra stuff in there, but
Yeah.
a lot of it was just the dairy and the gluten and the wheat is like that like eliminates like 90% of food, you know? And and also like my mom was health conscious, so she wasn't feeding me a whole bunch of sugar at every
Yeah.
meal and like we're eating like trying to base our meals around like a protein source, a vegetable source, a carbohydrate source.
Yeah.
Um and so that's like kind of my diet growing up was eating whatever mom cooked, which was usually like some type of meat, like a chicken, um, or sometimes beef, sometimes a burger, whatever. And then some type of vegetable, broccoli, asparagus, peas,
Yeah.
green beans, stuff like that. And then some type of carbohydrate source being like rice, or we started getting into like gluten-free stuff, which is like
Mm.
gluten-free pastas or gluten-free bread, gluten-free bagels. Um, and like that was like most dinners, lunches were usually like sandwiches.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would eat like salads and stuff like that. And then breakfast was oatmeal. I didn't really eat a lot of eggs growing up because like I had that sensitivity to
Right.
eggs. But luckily I think after eliminating a lot of the allergen foods from my diet for a few years,
Yeah.
I got retested and I was not allergic or I didn't have the food sensitivities to as many foods. So I was able to start eating eggs again,
Nice.
which is nice. It kind of shows that my body's immune system was kind of hyper responsive
Mm.
because I was, beating it down with so many other like just eating a lot of gluten and stuff. Like the hyper immunity was like, oh, like just attack everything, you know?
Right.
So yeah, now that I can eat eggs, super happy about that.
What
Um,
was it a blood test or was it a scratch test? What was the
yeah, so I did a blood test when I was young, I think maybe around 8 or 10 years old.
Yeah.
And then I did another blood test before I went to college, and that's the one that kind of showed that like we're clear of these things. We still gonna avoid the gluten, the wheat, and the
Yeah.
milk. Um, and I also did a scratch test during that time, but the scratch test was like the only stuff reactive on the scratch test were like the common allergens of like some type of grass,
Okay.
um, some animal dander and dust.
Yeah.
and those were like the stuff that makes you sneeze, not the stuff that affects you from eating it, you know.
Right. For sure.
Um,
When
but yeah, so that was my diet growing up was mostly focused on just trying not to get sick and throw up from an allergy.
Well, it's so interesting when we went to go see my allergist, they're like, "Hey, we don't really have anything for because for all the stuff that I was allergic to, non-food, they would give me an allergy shot for, and like that
hmm
stuff went away after 5 or so years. I don't remember how long I took the shots for, but they're like for the food. I'm just gonna have you stay away from it for a couple of months, and then every once in a while, feel free to throw it back in." And they're like, and then after 10 months, they're like, oh yeah, once a week is fine. So then I would just binge on it on like Fridays and Saturdays. And I'm like, oh no, I've
Yeah.
a terrible relationship with food. I don't stop eating when I'm full anymore. It's like I gotta learn to listen to my body now that I'm 30. This is wild.
Uh-huh.
So did you cook much for yourself, or you were pretty much pretty busy all the time with all the sports and stuff?
Like growing up, definitely didn't cook for myself, or
Yeah.
if I did, it was usually just like making a sandwich, which is
Mm.
really not difficult. Just putting ingredients together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, definitely towards the end of high school, I would like make more food for myself or
Mm.
just grab snacks and stuff like that. I wasn't making like dinner for everyone and stuff like
Mm.
that. But it once I got into college, the first year of college was eating the dorm calf food and
Yeah.
stuff, and it was all right, but it was kind of terrible, and
Yeah.
I was definitely eating a lot of things that I probably shouldn't have. That definitely made me feel more inflamed and not the best all the time.
Yeah.
So then my sophomore year, when I was able to move out of the dorm rooms and
Mm.
live in a campus housing, that's when I started cooking for myself at every meal.
Yeah.
And so now it's mostly just cooking for myself. Or it's nice too that like my parents are eating a similar way as me. So
Yeah.
we'll just cook like three steaks
There
and
you
like
go.
it's nice. It's easy.
As you look back on your high school career, either sports or just hanging out with friends, are there any memories when you're like, oh, like I was in it. That was phenomenal. Like I really liked this time of my life.
I think it was really fun to be part of like there's definitely different groups that I was part of, and like the swim team was a great group and it was really fun to hang out with those guys, and um very good camaraderie between everyone on the team. It was very unique. I hadn't felt that before on any sports team.
Yeah.
And then like all the friends that I made through parkour was also a really interesting crowd of people,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of like the guys you would expect to see at a circus, and it's kind of like the skate community was back when skating first became a thing, and it's just guys hanging out and doing tricks and just like having a good time. And then also like the track community, which I'm still now very much a part of.
Hmm.
It's interesting to look back and see like me just starting out in the track community
Yeah.
and getting to know different people. And then now, like 8 years later or more from when I started pole vaulting and meeting all these people, now I'm like almost on the other end of things where I'm like starting to help coach kids, and
Yeah.
I'm still connected with a lot of people in Michigan through the track community, and it's really cool to see.
That's super fun. When you were doing parkour, was there any times where like you were running from cops or you're like, hey, like this like what were some of those stories?
Um, I don't think there's any times that we like got in trouble with police or anything like that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it was good, but there was definitely a few times we'd like go on private property to do flips or jumps, and people would be like, "Hey, you need to leave, like get out of here. What are you doing?" Um,
Just in someone's like backyard or like
no, it was like downtown
oh,
Grand
okay.
Rapids, and like there's a building with a slanted wall, and it's like perfect for doing a backflip off of. And so we're
Yeah.
all like doing that stuff, and then the security guard comes out and he's like, "What are you guys doing? Like, get out of here!" Like,
Don't you see the wall? I
Yeah.
need to. I have to do
I'm like,
it.
we're not hurting anybody. We're just having a good time. But I get it. It's all the liability stuff.
Yeah. So
Um,
for going to Michigan State, were you a walk-on? Did they recruit you? How'd that work out?
so originally I expressed interest to the coach and he told me like you need to jump this height and you can walk onto the team. And then I jumped, I think the height that he wanted me to jump was like 15.3,
Yeah.
15 feet 3 inches. And I jumped that at the first indoor meet of my senior year. And then after like he gave me the okay, like, yeah, you can walk on, like love to
So
have you.
what's the difference between so walking on is like you walk on the team, you're not recruited. Is that what that means?
Yeah, it's like pretty much to get recruited is they're giving you money. If
Gotcha.
you're not getting money, then you're considered walking on. I
Hmm.
think. I think that's
So
how it
did
goes.
did most D1 track teams have a lot of walk-ons or did they recruit a lot? I don't know how that works for track.
So it's hard for at least for Division 1 we're at Michigan State, and I think it's similar at a lot of other Division 1 colleges, is we have 12 full ride scholarships to give,
That's not a lot.
which is not a lot, yeah.
No.
Um, but then they're gonna cut that in half. Like, so if you have 12 scholarships, you could take one scholarship and cut it into like a few chunks of 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%, right? So
Okay.
you can recruit a kid and say, like, here, I'm gonna give you like a 10% scholarship now.
Yeah.
And the better you do, we can boost your scholarship up because hopefully more people are gonna start to age out who have scholarships or
Hmm.
the works like that. And you gotta imagine, so like I think it's 12 scholarships between both cross country and track.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure on all this stuff because it's been a while,
Yeah.
but
Well, now they got NIL money. That's
yeah,
just
yeah, which is a whole nother thing. But then also, like if you imagine there's usually 32 spots on the team to compete at like the conference championship.
okay.
And so like out of 32 people, only 12 of them could be on full ride scholarships. And if you have a really good athlete who's like a senior,
Yeah.
usually you're putting him on a full ride scholarship. So now you're down to 11,
Okay.
you know? And if you want to recruit somebody, you want to have recruiting power, you probably need to give them a little bit more money,
Yeah.
So like the scholarships go very quickly.
It sounds like it. So is that just because football and basketball get so many of the scholarships, or is it equal per team or like sport?
I don't know who determines the scholarship limit. I think it's maybe the NCAA like
Oh, okay.
governing body determines it per sport
Yeah.
because it wouldn't be fair if it's like based off budget because then you just have the rich schools buying everyone. Um,
Well, like I feel like the football team is there like 50 slots, or I don't know how many people are on the roster,
yeah,
but it just seems that sideline's huge.
yeah. I don't know how the football works as much, but I do know that like the NIL has hit the football program a lot better.
Yeah.
So now it's like you're getting money no matter where you are.
Just come to my
Um,
school.
yeah, it's like they'll do the thing where they're like, okay, we can't give you a scholarship, but if you do this NIL contract, it'll give you $50,000 every year,
Yeah.
and that'll cover your school for you.
Hey,
And
that's
it's
not
just
bad.
like, yeah, but I'm like, holy, like that's ridiculous. But that's where the money's at is the football.
Yeah.
But anyways, so my coach told me I could walk on if I jumped a certain height, and then that indoor state meet of my senior year of high
Yeah.
school, I ended up jumping 16 feet. I won the indoor state meet, and
That's
then
huge.
yeah, it was great. And so then my the Michigan State coach gave me a scholarship, and it was a small percentage, but
Let's
he
go.
gave me a scholarship, and he was like, yeah, you can walk, or you can like you'll get a scholarship position on the team.
Yeah.
Um, and then so that's when I signed to Michigan State and committed there.
Where did, if I can do math correct, where did 8 inches come from? That's wild.
Yeah, it was for me it was mostly like I was really learning a lot of new stuff for pole vault because it was like towards the senior year I started working with a new coach
Yeah.
and he was teaching me some new things, feeling some new stuff. and also like still as a boy growing and
Okay.
putting on muscle mass and just the more experience I had, at that point I've only been pole vaulting for like 6 years and so still felt very new to the sport and it was definitely like I started getting more serious about it as
Yeah.
the talk of getting a spot on a track team became a reality. So I started training harder, started probably just learning the sport better, getting a little bit more coordinated with how all the jump works,
Yeah.
uh, and just happened to put everything together on the day and it worked out.
So when you're going, I feel like any track events are wild because it's not like when it comes to like basketball or something like that, like you can force it, you can recover, you can do this, you can do that, and like you got time to kind of get things flowing. But for track sports, like you got a couple runs at it. So how do you get yourself in that space to make those count?
Yeah, it's all about perfection, right? It's
Mm.
all about everything lining up perfectly and a lot of it is kind of to get out of my own head, which
Okay.
works the best for me is when I'm not in that state of like thinking about everything. It's more like I'm feeling it. I'm feeling that flow state a little bit of
Okay.
where you're not just laser focused, locked in your head. You're more outside of your head. You're taking a look from away from yourself and you're almost like looking on top of your body. But it's like you're not there, but you are there. And it's that flow feeling of like I'm just moving through it. And that's the ideal circumstance. A
Yeah.
lot of the times though, it is me in my head thinking about I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. And it's like that's sometimes where the performance will go downhill because
Yeah.
I'm thinking super hard and I'm super tense. And when you get tense, you get locked up and you get tight and it's not as good. But at least a lot of the technical events is very much like trying to in practice get it as perfect as I can, and the
Yeah.
meet know that it has been perfect in practice, and I can just relax, have a good time. And
When
that's usually how it goes is when I'm having fun, I'm doing
yeah.
good.
That's fantastic. When you're doing the run up, is the if I don't know if that's the proper term of it, but when you're running up to the jump, are you trying to go full speed? Are you trying to go a certain amount of steps, or does faster mean better? What's the scenario?
Yeah, so like for pole vault, you have to be able to take off at the right spot
Okay.
because the pole is a certain length, right?
Mm.
So you can't just start running from wherever because you might take off too far away and your pole might not be planted in the ground, or you might take off way too far under and
Yeah.
then your pole's back here and you get hit off your feet.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's there's a spot usually on the runway that if I start here with my left foot forward and I start running, I'm gonna take 16 total steps to
Okay.
get to the takeoff point, and then I'm gonna jump off the runway. And realistically, you want to be running as fast as you can,
Okay.
but you also want to be able to run as fast as you can control.
Hmm.
Because if you're running too fast and you can't control anything, then like what's the point?
Yeah.
So you want to run at the fastest controllable speed. And um it's really hard if you try to think in your head, oh, I'm gonna run a little bit slower on this one so I jump better. I'm gonna run a little bit faster on this one. Like you should try to just run the same every single time.
Okay.
And ideally, like if you're running the same every single time, it's slowly over time you're gonna start to get faster by running the same because you're gonna
Okay.
get more efficient. And also like as your body warms up, as your adrenaline continues to rise, you're gonna just start to run a little bit faster in each of those attempts.
Yeah.
Then on the runway, okay, I back my step up a little bit, a little bit, a little bit.
Mm.
But yeah, a little bit of it is a mathematical equation of like guess and check where am I taking off, where's the runway,
Yeah.
all this stuff.
So are you counting in your head the steps, or you're just like, I'm getting close, I'm gonna jump soon? Like, how do you?
Yeah, well, again, it's like sometimes I'll count the steps,
Okay.
sometimes I'll think in my head like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I usually only count my left leg
Oh,
because
okay.
that's my takeoff foot. So I'll
Yeah.
count. if I'm taking like 10 steps total, I'll just count to five
Hmm.
and it's a little bit easier. But sometimes if I get into that flow state and I'm not even thinking about my steps,
Yeah.
then you just know. You don't even have to like count. It just knows. It just happens, right?
So you were talking about the adrenaline throughout the competition. How long does a day of jumping for you take, and do you enjoy a longer break in between, a shorter break? How does that work?
So decathlon is pretty much the whole day,
Okay.
and it's a combination of like running, jumping, and throwing. And so you really have to get good at maintaining your adrenaline and making
Yeah.
sure you're not gonna just dump it all into one event and then be cooked, you
Yeah.
know?
So
Um,
did you? I'm gonna interrupt you. Did you
yeah,
do decathlon in high school, or
no.
you
Yeah, I picked it up in college.
did, that's kind of a wild pickup, right?
Yeah, but it's the thing is it's not offered in high school in Michigan. It's
Okay.
there's only a few places in the world where they offer or not in the world in America
Oh,
where they
I got
offer it.
okay. That makes
So
sense.
it's definitely something that you're only gonna pick up in college.
Yeah.
Um, but still like it takes a while to learn 10 events in the track
Yeah.
discipline, you know. Um, and so yeah, there's a lot of training that goes into it. And when I say like, oh yeah, I just picked it up, it's like I trained for like 2.5 years before I competed in my
Yeah.
first decathlon. So
So
it's a lot goes into it.
did the coach say, "Hey, you're also good at this," or were you like, "Hey, coach, watch this"? Like,
Um,
what's the introduction into giving it a shot?
it was my interest, I think. I was just interested in saying like, oh, like I'm good at pole vault, but I like to do other events. Like I
Yeah.
would be interested to try the decathlon. And he was like, yeah, for sure, we can give it a shot. Because like at the end of the day, it's like worst comes to worst, like it just made me faster and stronger, which is just gonna help me in pole
Right.
vault. But I'm glad that I became a decathlete.
Yeah. So when you start training pole vault, when you first get there, what did your training program look like, and then how did it change when you became a decathlete?
Well, I went in straight into the decathlon
Oh,
program.
right in.
Yeah,
Okay.
right in. It was me and another freshman. And we kind of were doing all the training that normal decathletes were doing, but just a little bit less.
Yeah.
And a lot more lifting than I was ever used to in high
Hmm.
school. Like I was a little bit of like, oh, I'll lift for aesthetics,
Yeah.
look good in high school, and then like college came around and all of a sudden it's like, okay, I got to learn how to do a hang clean and a hang
Right.
snatch and all these like Olympic lifts, and then we're doing like squats and deadlifts and just like all sorts of stuff I wasn't used to.
Yeah.
But it was great. I loved it. And then yeah, a lot more running, a lot more lifting, and then learning a lot of the events,
Hmm.
just taking time to learn how to throw the shot put, how to throw the discus, how to do high jump, how to do long jump. And like I'm still at that point where I'm like, I need to just take some time and learn, you know.
Yeah.
Is like you can be in the best shape of your life, but if you don't know the technique on how to do a
Right.
high jump, you're not going to get over that
Yeah.
bar.
Well, I feel like mentally that's got to be exhausting as well. Like just learning one new sport is tough. I feel like learning
Yeah,
nine more is tough.
I think it can be for some people, but for me it's very refreshing.
Okay.
Like
You
I'm
like
I'm one
fun.
of those guys who if I'm only working on one problem, then I'll just lose my mind
Yeah.
almost. I felt that in high school a little bit, which was why I was interested in starting decathlon, was like I was just working on pole vault, working on a pole vault, working on pole vault, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like I'm about to lose it. Like I want to try something else. I want to do something new.
Yeah.
You know, so in decathlon is like you have one bad event, it's like you just move on, go do something
Yeah.
else. You get 10 opportunities to be great, you know?
That's super cool. So all the events, so all the running events you get to do that once, right? Or how
Yeah,
does the
yeah. So pretty
format
much this is how it goes. Is the first day,
work?
the events are always in the same order, but
Okay.
the first day it starts off with the 100-meter dash, and then the long jump, then the shot put, then the high jump, and then the 400. And that's the first day. And then you
Yeah.
go home, rest, recover, eat, come back for the second day, and you do the 110 hurdles, the discus, the pole vault, the javelin, and then the 1500 at the very end.
Okay.
And usually there's about, I think the rule is there needs to be like, it's like 30 minutes between each event minimum.
Okay.
Usually it's more closer to like 45, maybe
Yeah.
sometimes an hour. Um, but they'll and then like at championships, sometimes they'll even take like a 3 hour break between certain events. Um, but then you compete against everyone, but also at the same time, you're more competing for a score.
Okay.
So each event will be awarded a certain amount of points for what you score. So if you throw the shot put 14 meters, you might get like 700 points.
Yeah.
But then if another guy throws 15 meters, he'll get 800 points.
Is
But
it
then
is it
but then like I might be able to make that up in another event. You know what I'm saying?
is there an
So it's
allotted
not
amount
so much about
per
no,
event?
it's more of a
Is it a Z score?
I think so. It's kind of like a exponential like curve
Hmm.
where it like flattens out. So like as you score more points, like a good example is like in the high jump, every time you jump 3 centimeters,
Yeah.
you probably will get like 30 points,
Okay.
right? And so every time you jump 3 centimeters, you'll get 30 points. And so each bar that you make, you'll get 30 points, 30 points, 30 points. And so if you jump like the world record, you'll probably get like 1,200 points.
Okay.
But like decathletes are not doing that.
Yeah.
We're doing stuff that is like more in around the 700, 800 point range.
Hmm.
You get what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so like it becomes kind of a thing where it's like, okay, my strong suit is this, his strong suit is this. Can I make up enough points on him that he can't make up enough points on me?
Yeah.
And then you kind of battle it out. And it's always really interesting because the last race is the 1500 and
That's wild. That's the
about
last one.
yeah, yeah. About 1 second in the 1500 is about 7 points, I think.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times guys will be like, okay, I'm like 30 points behind this guy. If I can beat him by 4 seconds, then I can win, you
Yeah.
know? And so it's definitely technical and competitive. And a lot of the times it's like, okay, don't let this guy beat you, and you got to try to beat that guy by 5 seconds
Yeah.
and like go get it.
When you first started competing 2.5 years later, when did you notice that you were going to be pretty good at it?
Um, Honestly, like it was rough because I was kind of accumulating a lot of injuries and stuff. And so I knew that I really enjoyed all the stuff and
Yeah.
I knew I enjoyed all the events and I knew I enjoyed like throwing and I was getting pretty good at throwing. Um, but then I like again I kept getting injured to where like my first year I could have competed in a decathlon. I injured my hamstring and I couldn't compete.
Hmm.
And then the next year that I was going to compete, which was my junior year of college, I injured my hamstring again right before a decathlon, and I was like devastated. But at this point, I had started the carnivore diet,
Okay.
and I started that in the winter of my junior year.
Yeah.
And so by springtime, I was like 2, 3 months into it, and I had like injured my hamstring, and I was like, you know what, like this sucks. Like, I'm not going to be able to do a decathlon. Like, I was devastated. My coach was like, "Hey, let's just go and let's see," because we had like 8 days to get better, eight
Yeah.
days to get healthy. I just kept doing carnivore diet and I kept doing as much rehab and massage therapy and all that stuff that I could do for it. And then I got better and then I did a decathlon. And
Yeah.
I did it with my leg not being 100%.
Uh,
And I actually ended up getting a national qualifying mark. And so I won that decathlon that I was at, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. Like this is
what
like what I love.
what was the deciding factor on going carnivore?
That was again, like like I kept getting like these small injuries and stuff.
Yeah.
And I had a problem where for a while my stomach was like really struggling with some indigestion.
Yeah.
I took some like high amount of ibuprofen because I had some injury and like the trainers at Michigan State at the time like were, hey, you should take this, it'll decrease your inflammation, make you feel better.
No.
And it, yeah, I just burned a hole in my stomach, you know,
Thanks.
because
Thanks.
I never really took that stuff when I was growing up either. So
Yeah.
it definitely like made my stomach unwell. I was having digestion issues. And then also I was like looking at it like all my allergies are like preventing me from getting all these things. Like
Yeah.
I just started questioning so many things like why do I need to eat all these carbohydrates? Like why do I need to do this? Why do I need to do that? Like why do I feel like my performance is getting worse? Like why do I like all this stuff? I'm like, what's going on? And then I found a video of a guy talking about how carnivore diet was like improving his Crohn's disease.
Yeah.
And Crohn's disease is a, a problem with digestion. And I was like, whoa, this is interesting. Like, let me look into it. And then I just researched like 300 hours. I was just listening to so many podcasts. I was
Yeah.
like reading articles, watching videos, listening to all these people who had personal experiences with it.
Mhm.
And I was like, this sounds awesome. And I got nothing to lose because at that
Yeah.
point I was like, I don't even like, I can't stay healthy enough to train and compete. Like,
Right.
what's the worst that happens is like I just stay in the same place. Like I might as well try something and see if it works.
Mhm.
And so then I made the switch to carnivore and I started feeling better. But then again, like the big thing that really made me realize, oh, carnivore is working as well was that decathlon that I did
Yeah.
where it was like, oh wow, like 8 days after injuring my hamstring, like I can heal very quickly
Right.
and like everything's good now.
Hmm. That's so what was your go-to meals at that point? Was it just ground beef and salt or
Yeah,
you hitting?
it was ground beef and eggs and salt and butter and steaks.
Yeah.
I would go to Meyer and buy a lot of chuck steaks.
Okay.
Meyer is just like a Walmart grocery store kind of thing in
Yep.
Michigan. I realize that that's not in many places in the
No,
world.
I'm just a little south of you in Chicago, so we
So
are
know,
very
you
well
know,
versed in
okay,
Meyer.
okay. But for the viewers, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then I would buy the chuck steaks because they always be so cheap.
Mm,
Because like nobody wants to eat the chuck steak because it's always like tougher.
yeah.
But then like I would just like gnaw on it and eat it and it was fine. But I was it was like I
Strong,
was like,
strong
oh,
line.
cheap steaks and stuff. But yeah, it's just a lot of stuff like that. And then at the meet actually, which was in Arizona, my dinner was just going to a Texas Roadhouse and eating a steak there.
Nice.
So
Did you get much pushback from any of the athletic trainers or anybody while you were competing at school with what you were eating?
um yeah, it was like a lot of people were questioning it.
Yeah.
Originally, I didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
I was like keeping it on the down low. I told a few of my teammates and I told my dad, I was talking to my dad a lot about it because again, like from him having his cycling background, he was a little bit well versed in nutritional
Right.
supplementation and all stuff like that. And also he's just always going to be like a student of the sport of learning and trying to improve that stuff. So like I told him,
Yeah.
and then it was pretty much like from there, I was like, okay, we're experimenting, we're trying it out, we're seeing what
Yeah.
works. And yeah, it worked really good. And like competed at the once I competed at that decathlon and I was like, okay, I'm not afraid to like tell everyone now
Yeah.
because I had success with it. And then I remember like that next year, the head coach was like a little concerned. She was like, I feel like this could be like an eating disorder, and I don't want you to like run into any issues and stuff like that. And I was like, this is like the best I've ever felt in my life. Like there's no way this could be an eating disorder.
Yeah.
Like I feel like the eating disorder would be eating the same and expecting different results.
Yeah. Well,
It's like,
I think it's interesting because most people that haven't tried it are like, oh, it's bad for this reason, this, and this. And then people that have tried it, they're like, oh, I've never felt better. I don't know like why I thought feeling bad was so normal, like being
Yeah.
tired in the
Yeah.
afternoon or just mentally and being inflamed everywhere was normal. And
Hmm.
it's like, have you tried it before? No? Okay, then like
Yeah.
let's maybe give it a shot for a little bit, see how it feels.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's funny. But I do understand that everybody is different and
Yes.
everybody operates differently. But I know for sure that people will not feel good eating a bunch of processed food as an
Yeah.
athlete. I know a lot of people who feel great when they eat a more natural diet
Mhm.
of things that grow on trees or out of the ground and things
Yeah.
that are animals products, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I got a little bit of pushback, but there wasn't too much. And I think at that time I kind of became that outlier where people are like, hey, he's doing his own thing.
Yeah.
He's different. He's not like me, so he can do whatever. And
Yeah.
um, but yeah, it was funny.
So going through, so junior and senior year, what does your outlook on sports look like? And then as far as like, are we looking to get a certain job that we're studying for in school wise, or we're just, I want to hit the sports hard?
Um, Pretty much like my whole thing going into college was like I was like, yeah, I'm here to be an athlete. Like
Nice.
I want to be an athlete. And so I trained as much as I could. And then my schooling was in kinesiology, so
Okay.
that's right in line with learning about athletic stuff. And um, pretty much set up my schedule so it could be easy and give me time to train when I need to train
Yeah.
and focus on myself, but then also taking interesting classes that were very, very beneficial to me, like sports physiology and anatomy and other high level science classes like that. But as of now, like I've graduated from Michigan State. I'm now post collegiate with my track career. I am working as an assistant volunteer coach at Grand Valley State, which is in Grand Rapids. It's about 30 minutes from my house, so it's really
Okay.
nice. And I'm still very much training and trying to be the athlete, you
Yeah.
know? I think there's going to be a point in my life where I'm like, all right, time to put the shoes up and go to work and try to make money and have a family. But as of now, I realize that like I'm at the point in my life where like it's a once in a lifetime thing and you might as well make it work as much as you can or at least give it a try.
Yeah. So post or I had this question earlier. As far as on the team, I know like you run the 100, you get points for your team. Is the decathlon the same amount of points for your team as a single race, or are you?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
That's what's crazy about it is you do 10 events to get 10 points for your team, whereas somebody runs a few races like
Yeah.
a prelims and a finals and they get 10 points for the team.
So were you usually like a lock for your team, and they're like, "Oh, he's got this," or
So Michigan State was never, at least the men were never really in contention for like a huge conference
okay,
victory. It was always individual at like I was always looking at it from an individual aspect of
yeah,
like I want to win conference, I want to qualify for nationals and I want to perform to the best of my abilities and then qualify for higher level meets like the Olympic trials or going to Pan Am's, going to the Thorpe Cup, those like stuff like that for a decathlete.
yeah. So and how did that go for you in your collegiate career?
It was awesome. I came away with two conference titles in the
Nice.
decathlon. I was able to break the school record, and then my teammate broke it right after me. So, oh well. And then I went to a U.S. Championships, which is kind of like the Olympic trials, but just
Okay.
not in an Olympic year.
Yeah.
I went to the Pan American Games and finished third place there.
That's pretty
Uh,
damn good.
yeah, no, I was really happy about that.
It's
I
wait, let's not breeze over that. What it was it a surprise that you were there? Were you
so
ranked?
that was a weird one where based off my placing at the US Championships,
Yeah,
I think I was like the 10th guy in the US or something like that. Or maybe I was like I think I was like maybe 11 or 12 in the US.
yeah,
And for the selection process for the Pan American Games, they were pretty much like going from top of the list down.
yeah,
But then the top three guys went to the World Championships, so like they didn't really want to do it.
yeah.
And the next like six or seven guys were like kind of done with their season because the Pan
Okay.
American Games happened in October
Yeah,
and everyone else was like competing through July and August. And then they're like, okay, finally some downtime. So like everybody
gotcha.
like goes in their off season in August,
Yeah,
and then it's like August, September, October, people just start training again in October, and you're telling them like, hey, there's a high level meet in October. Do you want to go?
yeah,
Not as many people went to that. But like at that point I was hungry to compete for Team USA and I was like, I just anywhere I can go would be great.
yeah.
And so I got the call for that and I was like, of course, even
Do
though
you,
I was
do you,
like,
do you get a call? Do you get an email?
it was an email, it was an email. You've been selected for the Pan American teams, fill out all these forms. And I was like, all right, here we go.
Do you call your mom? Do you call your dad? Or like, how do you celebrate?
Well, it was funny because like I was right there at practice. I told my coach, and he's like, "Oh, we signed up for that." Like he was like, "Oh man!" Like it like changed the whole like outlook on training. Now it's like, okay, we gotta go get ready for a meet.
That's hilarious.
And then like called my parents. They were super excited. Everyone's like frantically trying to book flights to go to Chile, which
Yeah,
is where it was, and that's like on the other side of the world from me. And
yeah, right.
so it's just crazy. And then the training was like weird because I had just started up my college season again.
Yeah,
And so like obviously my running was not in perfect shape,
yeah.
but I was bulked up a little bit from the summertime. So
Mhm.
all my throwing events went really well and my jumping events didn't go terribly.
So
So
how do you bulk on carnivore? Because it's very satiating. You get full very easily. Most people just shed a bunch of weight, obviously a lot of inflammation, but also fat because it's just hard to eat so
yeah.
much. How do you bulk on carnivore? What's your what's your secret?
I think the secret for me is to lift heavy weights and your body will get that physiological response
Okay.
to bulk up. And then also I really think that eating eggs can
Yeah.
be like a secret game changer, especially if you do raw eggs,
Okay.
because
I'll just
then you can,
hitting it all.
it's like what they say about like drinking your calories is
Yeah.
like it's dangerous for people when they're like, because it's gonna make you fat because you're gonna drink calories and you don't realize that you're like
Yeah.
getting all these calories. But like with raw eggs, it's like you can like eat a whole meal of like a steak and then afterwards you just have like four raw eggs in a cup, blend it up, and then slurp it down, and it's just like drinking water
Yeah.
because then your body's like, oh, we just drank some liquid. Like it doesn't realize that, and then you get the extra calories in, and
Yep.
at least that's been helpful for me in the past. But also just it's just eating a lot and training a lot.
Yeah.
Like you don't need like a dirty bulk or anything like that. You just eat and lift heavy and you'll get strong. Your body will respond to the
I
stimulus you give it.
I went to a CrossFit football seminar once, and so that's like the John Wellborn. He is an NFL offensive lineman, and they had a bunch of other like football players in there, just and strength and conditioning coaches. And they're like, "All right, we're going to teach you the Wendler program. We're gonna get you stronger and bigger. And if you want to bulk, you can buy the cheapest gallon of milk you can because it has the most hormones in it." So I
That's
did a
funny.
I did a gallon of milk for the first day, and I'm like, this is impossible. So I'm like, it's a better choice.
Uh-huh.
Let's go half a gallon of chocolate milk. I feel like that. So I was hitting half a gallon of chocolate milk, and I gained at least 30, 40 pounds. That was very unnecessary. Like my deadlift went
Yeah.
235 to like 480, but like
Oh my.
it went like all I was doing was squat and deadlift for like an extended period of time. I was
hmm
busting through jeans and sweatpants, and finally at some
That's
point my
crazy.
sister is like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean? People are telling me like I'm getting stronger and bigger." I'm like, maybe a little too excessive.
Yeah, yeah.
We're
We might
hoping,
slow down a bit
yeah,
too.
we're hoping the muscle memory still will remember it now that I'm not that heavy. But I
hmm
did, when I say I read an article, I read the headline of it, but it said
Yeah.
as far as muscle growth, you can still get the same without eating carbohydrates. And that was always my fear when on
hmm
carnivore. It's like, oh no, I'm gonna lose out on gains for a couple of months. And it's like, oh no, I'm just coming up with excuses.
Yeah, no, that whole myth about like carbs being necessary is like I don't I just it doesn't make any sense to me why because the only thing that happens to carbohydrates is you just like you turn it into energy to fuel your muscle. But
Yeah.
like you can also use fats and proteins to fuel your muscles.
Mm.
And also um like you can create glucose in your muscle cells through fat and protein
Yeah.
metabolism. And your body recycles glucose into lactose or lactate and then back
Mm.
into glucose. So you're able to create glucose in your body naturally.
So even on like longer training days for you, you don't feel like you're losing energy.
No, it's like if
I'm out
anything,
of
it's like
excuses.
yeah, if anything, it's like I'm like, dang, I've been training for like 3 hours and
Yeah.
I haven't eaten anything and I gotta go do some more stuff and I'm like starting to feel wired.
Yeah.
I'm like feeling like really like, yeah, let's go, let's get it. And that's when I'm like realizing like, okay, like I might be starting to get into some training debt and I need to like be safe here
Right.
because I can easily push myself now to just train past like fatigue and
Right.
failure because it's just like once you hit that point where your body's just in sync and it's creating all of its own energy from your fat and
Yeah.
your protein that your body has, like you're in that state where you're burning fat for energy, you feel invincible, you feel like you can just keep going and going.
Yeah.
And that's when it's like I'm like, okay, like I'm in it now. Like this is great.
Hmm.
This is gonna be like great training and stuff. But that I also realized like if I don't get some food in me after this training period, I'm
Yeah.
gonna feel exhausted because like it's just like you need some food to recover as well, you know.
Right. So how risky was it eating the meat in Chile or Chile? How did you find the food there?
That was a big thing for me to just like be able to kind of relax in the diet because I think the problem is every once in a while, like the carnivore diet worked for me, and then I became dogmatic about it because I was like, this is the only way. I have to
Yeah.
stay 100% strict. And then I kind of took a step back from that dogma and went, okay, the reason it works is because of these things. I can still get those benefits even if I have a little bit of spice on my meat
Yeah.
or if I eat a piece of fruit here and there, you know. And then it's like I'm just always trying to evolve my understanding of the diet and always paying attention to how my body feels. But going into Chile, I was super nervous because I didn't know what the meals were going to look like.
Yeah.
Luckily they had like a dining hall at the Pan American Olympic Village
Okay.
and the dining hall always had some type of meat able to
Okay.
be
That's
eaten
great.
and for breakfast they always had some type of hard-boiled eggs. So that was like my go-to. Also my parents were there and they brought me like a steak during my competition so I could like snack on little chunks of meat if
Yeah.
I needed to. Um but yeah, so that worked out good, but it was really good for me to kind of be able to take a step back and be like, okay, I'm eating this meat that has like a little bit of this gravy on it.
Yeah.
Is the gravy going to completely destroy my whole entire performance? No, it's not.
Mhm.
But do I realize that like I shouldn't be doing this every single day because I can feel a little bit of more inflammation here and there every once in a while?
Yeah.
Yes, I should probably not do that. It makes sense to me, you know?
Yeah. Being reasonable about it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And again with like the evolution of my diet, I've really started to become like a seasonal, like looking at it from a seasonal belief of like, all right, in the winter time, like fruit is not growing on trees, like there's not a bunch of crops growing out of the ground.
Yeah.
Like 100% being in a state of like pure carnivore is
Mm.
really good for you. And like your body's gonna do better in the winter time when you're eating less carbohydrates and you're eating more fats and proteins.
Yeah.
Then the summertime, you're getting more sunlight. Hopefully, you're gonna get more tan. That's gonna signal to your body that, hey, like there's gonna be fruit on the trees, there's gonna be crops growing in the ground. You can afford to eat a little bit of carbohydrate here and there without getting into a negative consequence, you
Yeah.
know? Um, but if you spend your entire day inside in the summer,
Yeah.
then your body thinks it's winter time and those carbohydrates are gonna not be as easily digested, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting thing that I've been playing with, but I definitely found that like wintertime, 100% carnivore, really strict, maybe a little bit of fruit here and there if I do a lot of cold exposure or if I get a lot of sunlight in on a cold day. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of sun out. I might have a handful of blueberries, but like again, a handful of blueberries is nowhere near like 10 grams of carbs, you
Right.
know? So it's like such minimal stuff.
Yeah.
But then like in the summertime is like I can have a piece of fruit with a few meals out of the day
Yeah.
if I'm spending the majority of my day outside getting sunlight, working, moving, exercising, you know. It's just kind of like this idea of like trying to live more like ancestrally where
Yeah.
if we're only eating carnivore, then that's like saying like, okay, we're not foraging for berries as well, you know?
Yeah.
But again, like you have to be careful because a lot of the time too is like, okay, you're gonna go to the store and you're gonna buy berries, but then like these berries are genetically modified. There's more sugar in them than there used to be even 50 years ago,
Right.
and they're sprayed with chemicals and pesticides. So it's like it's a lot of give and take right now,
Yeah.
but
Well,
it's good to be able to take a step back from the
yeah.
dogma of like you have to be a purist
Hmm.
and say you should be as pure as you can be, but
Yeah.
there are exceptions and there are times when like you need to be relaxed about it because if you're so uptight all the time, like it's gonna do worse for you
Yeah.
than being able to relax and not worry about it.
Well, I think if you can truthfully answer the question, is it working for you? Then yeah, that's great. And when most people are poo-pooing on whatever you're doing and you ask them, it's like, hey, is whatever new diet you're trying working for you, or are you happy with where you are? It's like, okay, then
hmm
maybe try to get a little bit closer to that, and then you can see well, what's going on there? Back to the chili stuff. What was it like competing for USA? How enjoyable was the competition?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was so cool to be wearing the USA jersey and like be out on a track. And in America, for some reason, like track and field is not that popular.
Yeah,
But then like in most other countries, it's usually pretty popular, especially Europe. But even like South America is like it's decently popular.
yeah.
But then in Chile, this was the Pan American Games came to Santiago, Chile.
Okay.
And so that's almost like having the Olympics in your home city. So everybody's coming out. Everybody's
Oh,
coming
that's
to
awesome.
see, you know, and so being in that stadium with all those people, it was insane. I've never had that experience before in track.
Yeah,
And like everybody wants to interact with you. Everybody wants to talk to you. Everyone wants to know you. And I know a little bit of Spanish.
yeah,
So I try to be, playing with the crowd a bit and like talking to people, waving to people. And like they loved it. They loved the fact that I was actually like responding to them and like
yeah.
and then their energy gave me more energy to compete even better. And like
Yeah.
it was really cool. Like when I talk about being in that like flow state, like that was like a little bit of a flow state where like I could feel them helping me do better. Like
Yeah.
it was just so cool. And I was almost like I felt like the performer for them at that
Yeah.
point.
That's super fun.
And yeah, it was cool. But again, like it was so interesting because decathlon is like some of the it's like honestly the hardest thing I've put myself up to do in my life. Like it's so hard, it's so difficult. It teaches you so many things in life. And like at the Pan American Games, my first event was the 100. I ran so slow compared to my normal
The
times.
first event's the 100.
Yeah, yeah. So the first event is
That's
the 100.
wild.
I ran so slow and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like why'd I run so slow? Like this is not a good setup, you know?"
What's slow for you? What would you say is a slow 100?
So I ran like an 11.1, which is
Okay.
like probably pretty fast for some people, but
Yeah.
in the past I've run like a 10.6.
Okay.
I would have been happy with like a 10.8, but I ran like an 11.1 and I was like, man, I didn't even break 11 seconds. Like that's kind of sad.
Yeah.
And then I long jumped and my long jump was like decent, but it wasn't that good.
Yeah.
And at that point I was like sitting in like last place, I think, and I was like, man, this sucks. Like what am I was like, you know what? Like I'm halfway across the world. I'm in a completely different country. Like I don't even care anymore. Like I'm just
Yeah.
gonna try to have fun for the rest of the events. And then like immediately threw a PR in shot put, and then I high jumped pretty well, and then I won the 400 in that heat. And then so I was like, oh wow, that was like so much fun.
Yeah.
And then the next day, like run an all right hurdle race, and then throw a PR in the discus,
Yeah.
and that was awesome. And then pole vault went really good for me because I was going through a slump in the past, like the year before.
Yeah.
And then I jumped a height I haven't hit in like a year from then. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is great. And then threw the javelin really well. And then by then I was like, oh man, like I'm sitting in third place. I could get to second place if I beat this guy
Yeah.
by like 2 seconds. I just have to run faster than by 2 seconds. I was like, easy days. Like I'm just gonna follow him the whole
Yeah.
race and then kick past him. And I followed him like that whole 1500,
Yeah.
but we took it out pretty slow.
Yeah.
So like we jogged like the first like 2.5 laps, and then I was
Yeah.
like, oh man, like I gotta get going, like I gotta
Right.
cook now. And it was just like we were sprinting to the finish line for like 400 meters.
Yeah. Oh no.
But he barely beat me
Yeah.
because I beat him by like 1.8 seconds and I
Oh
needed to beat him by two
man.
seconds.
Yeah.
And he crossed the line, and so like I got I was literally like 1 point behind him, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure. It was a crazy finish.
That's
But
wild.
I went from last place, not thinking I'm gonna win. Like I was so like sad and like I was like, man, this sucks, to being able to like cross the line, finish third place, be
Yeah.
given the like the flag, the US flag, and hold it behind my head and run around the track, like representing my country for
Yeah.
finishing third in like the Pan American Games is just such a crazy experience for me.
That's so cool. So when you're competing with all those guys, are you guys friendly? Are you like, hey, I hope you do really well, but kind of not? Like, what's the vibe?
Yeah, there's not a lot of beef between the decathletes. I
Yeah.
think there's if anything it's like kind of that camaraderie and that friendship because it doesn't matter as much on like how you place against each person in each race,
Yeah.
but it does matter in the end on like how many points you scored.
Gotcha.
So like there's usually some camaraderie of like people like you spend 2 days with these guys all
Yeah.
day. You go through so much suffering and hardship as well.
Yeah.
And you know that you've put so much training into this and so have they. So it's like, hey, like you might as well be friendly and nice to people. You
Yeah.
don't want to just be you don't want to just be a jerk. And like that's very much the way that I approach things is I really try to like make friends and have a good time
Yeah.
because like having fun will get me into that flow state that I talk about. Whereas like if I'm serious and it just ruins it for me. I get
Yeah.
too serious, you know.
Yeah. I mean, how long were you on a high for after competing at the Pan American Games?
Oh, that was awesome. I mean, I'm still probably riding a little bit of that, but it was such a great experience. And I actually ended up meeting my girlfriend there at the Pan
Really?
American Games.
Was she
Yeah,
racing? She was just in the audience, or?
she's she's a squash player,
Okay.
and so she was there to compete for Team USA for squash.
Oh, very cool.
And so yeah, so that was also a bonus.
Yeah. It's a positive shout out. So we're back now. What's next for us?
Right now I'm just training and like I was saying earlier, like taking that a step back and just learning as much as I can. My events that have been weaker compared to my competitors are my high jump and my long jump.
Okay.
If I can really dial those in, I think I can put together a better score than my past
Yeah.
scores. And so that's really my goals this year is to really like get good at high jump, really get good at long jump.
Mm.
I'm hopefully gonna compete at a decathlon maybe maybe in 2 months or maybe more towards the end of June.
Okay.
But for sure I'm going to compete at the uh US um it's the US national meet, which is
Okay.
at the end of July.
Cool.
So still some time away for that one, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's good. It's good to kind of have a little bit of a break period here and
Mm.
just learn.
So as far as learning goes, is it taking video of yourself and then watching other people do it? Is it a specific coach, like a
It's the
style?
coach right now for
Okay.
me. I'm working with Steve Jones, who is the Grand Valley high jump coach. He does the long jump as well. He's great in both, but right now he has a very unique thing going where he has four guys who have jumped over 2 meters, 20 centimeters,
Okay.
which is ridiculous. And he sent three guys to the Olympic trials last year. Um, and
Seems a
he would
little
have,
excessive.
yeah, I mean, as a Division II college, like that's insane. Not even a division, there's not even a Division I college that can do that. And
Yeah.
his one of his guys just took second place at the US Indoor Championship this past
Yeah.
week. So he is just a master of high jump.
Yeah.
And it's paying off right now. I'm feeling like I'm jumping a lot better already.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I'm happy with it.
That's very cool. All right, before I get to the last two questions, I've run this scenario by a couple of people, and they're like, "Hey, that's kind of interesting," or they're like, "That's ridiculous." But so like, there's the CrossFit Games for being the, we'll say, fittest or whatever their modality is. But I've always been, I would say, more athletic than my CrossFit counterparts. Like they're really good at working out. Like I like to work out, but I'd much rather play sports.
Hmm.
So I've always been like, how do you uh, do an event where you figure out how you're most athletic? But I feel like the decathlon that is athletic, but like for you, if you were to sprinkle in some other sports other than the 10 events you already do already, what would you look at as like a decider for athleticism?
Oh man. I am a big fan of martial arts and like
Ooh.
especially I've been getting into like UFC and MMA a little
Yeah,
bit. And I've trained karate with my dad and I'm kind of just started up this past summer training that. So I'm learning more about like fighting and
yeah,
the martial arts and it's very interesting how much technique goes into that and how much athleticism goes into being able to kick and punch and block and move and dodge and all that stuff.
yeah,
And you're wrestling someone 1 second and then you're standing up and kicking them the next. And so I think that ability to adapt to the changes in the fight
yeah.
is one thing that like track and field doesn't really have. Like track and field is all about executing,
Mhm.
Whereas like I think like MMA and UFC and martial arts is all about responding to
Yeah,
the attack and stuff like that. At least when you're defending, and then also like how they are, how if they're open, where
right.
you want to strike is going to be dependent on that as well. So that gets a little bit more of the free flow creativeness.
Mhm.
Um, that like I kind of miss a little bit in track of like that actual like competitive like your what you do affects the other person, you know? And track and field, like you got to stay in your lane.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not allowed to throw an elbow into the next lane over. But I mean, the same thing goes is like there's always one person on the runway when you're jumping. There's always
Yeah,
one person in the ring when they're throwing. So like you're not actually influencing the people as much, maybe mentally a little
right.
bit they get nervous, but usually it's not an influential thing. But then if you're like looking even at like soccer or football or rugby, anything like that is like how the players move will influence how the other players move.
Yeah.
And so like I think martial arts is like some of the highest level of that.
Okay.
Um, and also like learning more about squash through my girlfriend and
Yeah.
trying to play that with her. That's another one where it's like, because squash is a lot like racquetball for those who don't know.
Yeah.
It's very much like where they hit the ball, I have to respond to hit the ball where it
Yeah.
goes and then hit it where they're not. So it's like a little bit of that is kind of what I feel like I'm missing in track, but
Right.
I'm trying to get it in other parts of my life and it's enjoyable for me.
How sore were you after playing squash the first time with your girlfriend?
It's weird. I was not expecting to feel that.
Yeah.
My legs were working in like a different way because you have to do a lot more lunging
Yep.
for the ball, whereas like track is all just linear
Right.
movements. And I was like lunging side to side and like taking these deep lunges, but I did all right. I mean, she
Yeah.
played left-handed and beat me, but I did all right.
Yeah, I feel like it'd be really tough to you'd literally have to play all of the sports that are in the Olympics because I feel like there's so many of them, but then also there's team sports as well. So it's like, oh, do you
Mhm.
do the skill portion where it's just 3 points and then do you have a dunk contest in there as well? Like
Yeah.
I have a list of like 150 sports, so I'm like, all right, how do I tease some of these out? And it's like we got to find some place to ski.
hmm
Like
hmm
there's so many options here. I mean, I said I only had one more question. I lied. So I had the president of the enhanced games on here, and he was talking about like steroids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How prevalent and how much do you think it helps? Just if you see it around you in competition, you're like, oh well, this guy has improved by 10% over the last month. Like, what kind of things do you see out there?
So I haven't like ever run into anything that's like blatantly like this
Okay.
guy 100% is taking a steroid.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of issues and a lot of sketchy situations where it's like, how did this happen? Like,
Yeah.
and some a lot of athletes who are like they get into a like, oh, you got banned from the sport for 4 years and then you came back. Like but you got banned for doing steroids and you came back and that doesn't mean you're natural all of a sudden, you know.
Yeah.
And there's like it, but it hasn't really been a thing in the decathlon. There
Really?
are like at least recently,
Yeah.
you know, if you look at the 10 fastest times in the 100-meter dash,
Yeah.
9 of those guys have been tested positive for steroids.
Okay.
One of them hasn't, and it's Usain Bolt, who was the fastest guy.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, I don't know. That's interesting. And to be fair, he is the most genetic, freakiest freak of
Yeah.
all the freaks. So that's 100% possible. But it's just interesting that there are so many positive tests in the top 100-meter sprinters, and nobody's running times like Bolt nowadays.
Yeah.
So it means probably a lot more athletes are natural, you know. During the 80s and to the early 2000s was a huge, huge time of steroids for this
Yeah.
in the sport. And there were like decathletes during those times who were definitely doing stuff. But at that time, it might have been the same as like us taking creatine, like they
Right.
just did what everyone else was doing. But yeah, I think I haven't run into many major issues with that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I do think that everyone's always trying to do the next best thing to get the next best edge,
Yeah.
and that's a little bit of what my carnivore diet is like I'm
Oh,
originally
absolutely.
I found it so to get an edge on
Yeah.
competition, right? Um, but as with like steroids, is like I have not run into anybody who I'm like, this guy is 100% taking steroids.
Yeah.
But in some of the other track and field events, or just every once in a while, you'll hear things where it's like people are just a little sketched out about the way a guy did something here and there.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah,
And
it's not ideal.
yeah. And would you so the way when I asked him about it is he's like, yeah, 40% of the people in the Olympics were admitted to doping, and he's like, I just want people to be able to do it in a healthy manner because the way he's going to do it is you have to have a doc on staff and to make sure you're passing all your MRIs and stuff like that so you don't have any health issues being caused by whatever enhancements are on. Do you think that would be like a benefit for the athletes if they're going to do it anyways, or do you think that's just his way to kind of sell his events?
I think I think it's not beneficial to do steroids, and I don't
Okay.
think it's safe. I think the effects are more long term. I think the increasing your size of your heart muscles and causing like heart attacks is
Yeah.
more of a long-term effect,
Yeah.
and it's not going to be seen on an MRI like within the first 4 years of doing steroids.
Mhm.
But again, it depends on all bunch of different factors, how much you're doing. I think there are ways to do steroids safely.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at like the professional strongmen, um, it's like known that their sport is like a sport where you have to be on some type of gear
Yeah.
if you want to compete at the highest level. But if you're not taking those steroids, like you can't even compete with those guys.
Yeah.
And some of the guys will push their bodies to like a scary, dangerous place. Some of the guys will do it safely.
Hmm.
I think if it's regulated, then that'll be good. But I don't think it's a good idea to all of a sudden bring it into this idea that like, okay, if you want to be a good track athlete, you have to do steroids.
Right.
I never want track and field to become the same level as bodybuilding or the
Yeah.
same level as strongman, where it's like all the best guys are doing it. If you want to be the best, you got to do it.
Yeah.
I would love it for it to stay that way, where it's like if you're just a kid, you can just put a pair of shoes on and become the greatest athlete in the world. Like
Right.
that's the goal,
I like that.
But I think it's interesting and it would be really cool to see us push the boundaries and the limits of human potential.
Yeah.
But just like saying that it's gonna be conducted safely just because they pass a few tests
Okay.
is maybe a little bit of a fallacy, but
Yeah.
I do think it's probably gonna be more safe than it was in the past when they were
Yeah.
just taking random designer drugs and stuff like that.
Right.
But then again, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't even break any of the world records that they're claiming that they will break,
Yeah.
because if guys in like if Usain Bolt was beating all these guys who were taking steroids,
Right.
and let's say that Usain Bolt was 100% natural and just God gifted amazing talents, like I don't really know of people who can beat that,
Yeah. For sure.
And so yeah, and even now it's like the steroids just taking steroids is not going to teach you how to do an event better. It's not
Yeah.
going to make you more technical. It's not going to give you a better performance. I remember a there was a thrower from like the 2000s or maybe the 90s who had thrown a personal best while natural and a personal best while enhanced, and they were pretty much like the same mark.
Yeah.
And he said when he was natural, his technique was cleaner. When he was
Okay.
enhanced, he was just stronger,
Yeah.
but he threw the same distance.
Yeah.
So like I don't think like I think there's going to be some gaps where it's like steroids are not going to make you Superman in a technical event. You're not going to see tennis players taking steroids to get better at tennis. You're just going to
Yeah.
see them training to get better at tennis. And so the benefit of steroids would be maybe if you could put an extra 2, 3 hours into training
Right.
per week compared to someone else, and then you recover faster, maybe. But then there's also more issues that steroids can cause where like, okay, well then maybe your connective tissue is now weaker and
Mhm.
you're more prone to injury, or you're gonna get your hormones messed up for the rest of your life when you stop taking steroids,
Right.
or you're gonna be forever dependent on TRT. You're gonna be um like worried about possible heart attacks and other stuff like that. And
Yeah.
like the big one in track is EPO, which is
That's what I was going to bring up. Yeah.
yeah, which will increase your oxygen saturation of your blood, which is really good for like performance, especially in track.
Mm.
And I am pretty sure there's probably a lot of distance runners that will mess around with that kind of stuff
Yeah.
and pass tests and not pop positive, but it's again like there's still serious negative side effects and we see issues with it like all the time.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's a definitely a interesting hot topic and it's a dangerous topic to pursue. But
Yeah.
again, like some people want to pursue it at the highest level. And um I remember hearing about like the USADA and WADA, which are like World Athletic Doping Agency and
Yeah.
US Athletic Doping Agency, like both of them having like slight corruption where like athletes would test positive and they would say, we won't we won't test you positive if you tell us other athletes who are testing positive.
Oh no.
Yeah, so like they're letting people get away with it. Or like, yeah, I don't know. There's like corruption in the
Yeah.
system, which is like it's not good. And
Right.
yeah, it's just it's there's never gonna be the ability to 100% say somebody's 100% natural, you
Yeah.
know?
Well,
So
I think it's really interesting because obviously everyone likes the Olympics, but this guy himself, he has multiple businesses. He's in it to make money. He's cutting out a lot of different sports that aren't going to have eyeballs in it. He's offering a boatload of money, and he has massive investors like Peter Thiel, which a lot of people don't know is actually just a buddy of his that that was his first job out of college. He was a lawyer for Peter Thiel
mhm.
in a $10 million case that just it became huge. But he's gonna be selling whatever the stack is that the person is on, whatever they're racing. Like, oh, instead of wearing Usain Bolt's shoes,
Oh, you can take the stack. That's
it-
crazy.
well, and that's where a lot of the pharmaceuticals are going. Instead of saying like, oh, so and so is on Ozempic, this and this, it's gonna be so and so is on
Yeah,
the
test growth,
TRT. Yeah.
insulin, yeah.
Yeah, it's like go ask your doctor
Wow,
about buying this stack. And I think
that's
that,
crazy.
yeah, and I think they want to have all the doctors on hand to be able to show, oh, so and so is healthy, but you bring up a good point of like long term,
Yeah,
what are we looking at here?
that sounds super corrupt
Yeah.
and that sounds really terrible.
I feel like in a lot of
Now that you explain the marketing behind it,
right, well, and
that's
like
crazy.
so I had him on, then he was on Rogan, and I'm like, you guys are missing like obviously it's exciting to see people juiced up like because you know that some people are, but having them race openly about it. But we're selling you. They're selling something, and there's a disconnect. On he just didn't get that question out there, and I'm like, this is what they're looking for, as
Yeah,
far as this is how they're going to sell everybody on it. But yeah, I find it. I feel like in some people, like maybe the elderly, I think it would be great cognitively, but
I
figuring
think
out, yeah,
there's always a good time for a hormonal intervention.
yeah.
Especially like if there's any instances where like your hormones aren't working, or even
Mm.
like people who have thyroid issues, like
Yep.
that's a hormonal issue, and you need to take exogenous thyroid, which is a hormone.
Mm.
And so like you're taking hormones, but it's making your life better,
Yeah.
and I think there's probably a place for people who have run into any issues or like any like postmenopausal women, like there's probably some hormonal replacement stuff that they can do that'll help them.
Yeah.
So like yeah, there's definitely times that's gonna help, but like just trying to bring it mainstream is not it's not good to me.
Yeah.
Like that's like it's like the introduction of like the idea that like, oh, you need melatonin to fall asleep at night, and then you need a
Good
caffeine to
marketing.
wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
But you, like you see, oh, you need caffeine, you need melatonin. It's like, well, people don't even know how to live without those normally now.
Yeah.
Like some people don't, at least. And so like bringing it into athletics and saying like you need
Right.
testosterone if you want to perform at a high level. Like there's a lot of people nowadays who think that like if they want to look strong and
Yeah.
lean, they can't get that naturally. Like people will literally think that they can't achieve anything naturally
Mhm.
because of the blown up proportions of the bodybuilders and all the stuff everyone's taking.
Yeah.
And so it's really tough. And so like hopefully honestly, I'm here going like, hey, like I'm probably as natural as it's getting right now. Like I'm trying to eat like clean meat
Yeah.
and I'm not eating any like processed crap. I'm not taking any supplements and I'm just eating meat, eating a little bit of fruit here and there, getting out in the sun,
Yeah.
working out, like sleep. Like yeah, it's just like simple stuff like that, but it's just like it's just blown out of proportion where everyone sees the newest bodybuilder guy who's just shredded to the
Right.
gills and it's like, oh my gosh,
Yeah. Uh,
how are we gonna get this? And then it's like, yeah, I don't know, because and then there's the argument too where people make of like, oh well, genetics, like this guy's got better genetics, so he's gonna be a better athlete.
mm,
And I'm like, yeah, that's true. But then also is like sometimes this like the steroids are not gonna get you to catch up to genetics,
right.
So it's like if you're 5 feet tall, no matter how many steroids you take, you're not gonna be able to play in the NBA, you
Right.
know?
Well, I think I just saw a clip from Lance Armstrong, and he's like, steroids will give you like 10%, because I think he was doing 450 watts at whatever his training was, and then he was on EPO, and he's like, I was at 500 watts for half an hour, and I'm like,
Mhm.
I haven't been even close to anywhere from 500 watts, like ever. Like that's just absurd
Yeah,
that you're hitting that for 30 minutes. Like that's disgusting.
I did hear one time a stat that said, because like steroids was big in cycling too.
Yeah.
Like everyone was doing it though. Lance wasn't the only one.
Right.
He was the guy who beat all the other guys on steroids, you know?
Yeah.
But there's a stat that said it's healthier for your body to do steroids during the Tour de France than it is
Oh,
to do the Tour de France without steroids because
yeah.
it's so aggressive
Hmm.
and like so many of these guys are like damaging their kidneys and livers from just the amount of
Right.
exercise they're putting themselves through. So like in that case, like maybe for the ultra endurance stuff
Right.
where you're putting your life at risk if you don't take a steroid,
Yeah.
then I mean maybe it's justifiable, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Well, there's
Um
options. There's options.
yeah.
I
I mean
had,
it's cool that it's available for us to use,
yeah.
and be there for medical purposes to help people, but also like it's awesome to see the world's strongest man lift that heaviest deadlift in the world, you know?
He's like, yeah, I didn't sleep well for 6 months, but man, I lifted 1,100 pounds. It was
Yeah,
great.
exactly. Exactly.
But we'll finish up with the last two questions. You kind of hit on it a little bit there. But what's your definition of health? Not necessarily the dictionary definition, but what is health to you?
I think health to me is mind, body, spirit,
Okay.
right? And if your mind is healthy, you're happy because you're doing things you like to do, you're learning things you like to learn, you're at a point where you're able to challenge yourself mentally, but not over stressing yourself mentally, or you're just able to mentally handle the problems that you have in your day to day, then like that's good mind health, body
Yeah.
health. Obviously, like, are you able to move and use your body the way that you want to move and use your body? Are you able to wake up without pain and you're able to sleep and have normal human function, then like I think your body's in a good, healthy position. Obviously, people will take health to an extreme when they want to do things in life, like honestly, it's just pursuing that game of I want to be an athlete, so I'm going to change my health to being
Yeah.
like extraordinary, right? I'm going to be an extraordinary athlete. And some athletes will tell you like being at that top level is not super healthy. That's why people will peak for
Yeah.
certain times because it's hard to hold on to, right?
Mm.
But for me, like part of my mental health is also being physically healthy so that I can run around the track and have fun
Yeah.
competing because that's healthy for my mental, right?
Hmm.
And then the spiritual health as well is like it's kind of combining everything into like how is your relationship with your family? How is your relationship with yourself? How is your relationship with your belief in religion or in the future or the afterlife or whatever comes next? Like it's just like how is your relationship with the things that are kind of above just the mind and the body,
Yeah.
And that's like encompassing everything. And so like I think if you can get those three things to be healthy, then you're going to live a healthy, happy life. They always talk about the people in Italy who live for so long
Mm.
and they just smoke cigarettes and drink wine at every meal. And it's like, well, that's obviously they're not doing the healthiest thing for their body,
Yeah.
but mentally they're very healthy. Spiritually, they're very healthy. And physically, they are walking around a lot. They're probably
Mm.
getting a lot of sunlight. They're eating probably very healthy foods.
Yeah.
And they just have a few vices here and there. But like, I think those three things really can align you well on the path of life.
Yeah. I love that. And then what's something from your life that you think people would be able to take as a positive that are listening to the podcast?
I think the positive would be the idea that you don't need to do all these fancy things. You don't need to take the fancy pre-workouts. You don't need to take the special energy gels, and you don't need to take all the supplements. And you can literally just achieve a very, very healthy, natural fitness level, physique, whatever you're searching for, just through eating animal products and limiting your carbohydrates so that you're not getting overinflamed and running into issues like that. And teaching your body how to metabolize fat for fuel,
Mm.
right? Getting to the point where you're consuming saturated fats and you're burning fat as fuel and your body's able to metabolize because it doesn't have an over surplus of energy through carbohydrates. Now you know how to metabolize. Now your body's probably going to metabolize other things, right? Not only is it going to metabolize the fat and the protein, it's probably going to metabolize bad proteins, which could lead into diseases or cancers or other things like that.
Mm.
It's going to learn how to metabolize, recycle things like skin cells, hair cells. You're going to notice that all of a sudden, like, oh man, my nails are growing faster. I have more protein in my diet and my skin's clearing up and all sorts of stuff like that. But, anyways, it's just bringing that back to simple living,
Yeah.
sunlight, meat, fruit, sleep good, spend time with your loved ones.
There it is. Thank you so
That's
much for coming
all.
on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This episode is brought to you by Vital Athlete. And listen up, this could make a real difference. I've been using Vital Athlete Freeze Roll On for the last 6 months. I stopped using regular painkillers about 10 years ago because of the negative side effects on your liver and kidneys. Vital Athletes understands this. They've created a CBD roll-on specifically for pain and injury relief. Their Freeze Roll-On gives you fast-acting relief right where you need it, so you can keep going. If you care about getting the most out of every workout, then Vital Athlete is for you.